right?
Hi, Alan.
Hey, guys. Matt,
Hi, Matt.
George, Dick,
Hi,
Jan.
Dick.
Hello.
Hello again, Jan.
Hi.
Yeah. Hey, Max.
And George, I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Max, how's it going?
Oh, it's good.
Good.
I'll be back at work and everything next week, but I saw the thing today and wanted to jump in.
Very good.
Are the plans going to be screen shared or do we
Yes.
just, okay.
Okay.
Didn't know if I had to pull it up.
Yeah, I sent them out ahead of time if you wanted to take a quick glance at them, but Jan is going to walk us through them.
Oh, okay. I've got them on my desktop thinking I could flip back and forth, but it's much better if you've got them there.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Stephen.
How's it going?
Hey, Steve.
Hey, nice to see y'all.
Well, or this much of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I like your backdrop, Dick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a nice place to be.
Oh, it's really moving in that shot.
Yeah, that's kind of why I kept it. It was an action shot. So
Yeah, totally.
Just keep an eye on, make sure it doesn't drop a line while we're
Yeah, right.
water well.
It does look tempting.
multitasking and its best kind. Yeah.
Have you guys seen this thing on the wall behind me?
No.
That's
Nuh-uh.
Dana Moses. That's downtown.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Oh.
can see. Yeah.
That's our old building. That's where Sheepshead River Pottery is now.
Yeah.
And then
Nice.
that's the other block.
That's
Big
out
block.
of stamped metal, is it? Painted.
It's made out of corrugated steel roofing. She did it with a torch and then painted it.
Okay.
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Can you turn the cameras so we can get a better view? That's very cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
We have something similar that she had done, but it just says Parker on it. We have it tacked up to the outside of the garage. Nicely
Neat.
painted.
Cool.
He did this for my wife's 50th birthday. It was, I mean, I commissioned her because that was our building. And at the time we owned Two Fish, which was right there at the
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah.
So she sort of tried to fill in that side of the street. There's sailboats in the water out and back. It's hard to see on this little picture, but she started doing that. She wintered in Culebra, which is a small island in Puerto Rico. And she was there after a hurricane, picking up all the corrugated steel roofing that was just scattered around from everybody's roofs. And started drawing and cutting it out with a torch, and she started a whole thing with it.
Great. Love it.
I assume Barnaby's coming.
He's right there.
He's here.
Oh, did it? No, I missed it. Excuse me. Oh, there you are. Oh,
Shari's on and
Just
Bob
popped up.
Florence is on now too.
Shari has dogs. I didn't know Shari had dogs.
Yeah, she certainly does. Got two of them. Huh.
I just adopted January 1st from an Amish puppy mill in Ohio. It was brutal conditions, and I definitely think the Amish should lose their sweet image from the humane conditions. But anyway.
Where
another-
in Ohio?
I don't know exactly where, but if you Google the Amish puppy mills, you will see the horrendous situation going on. And it's
I,
not just in Ohio. It's Pennsylvania, a few other places. But they promote it as adoption, but it's really a sad situation. But anyway, so here's Alex and here's Sydney.
Well, congratulations.
Good.
Thank you.
They look happy now.
Mike.
5 years worth of torture, but they're adjusting, and I think we're a very good match. So, yay.
I lived with the Amish in Ohio, and I found that there were two very different, for the most part, very nice, clean people. But over along in the northeast quarter of Ohio, I was over there and I was appalled. They were living in filth
Mm.
in the two towns that I visited. I was stunned that it could be so different 40 miles away.
Well,
I've done business with the Amish sawmill in Whitefield.
Mhm.
Very nice people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My neighbors were great.
mm. Well,
Clean.
I'm
and-
sure, there's two sides of the fence, but. when it
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
to-
Well, that's why I was a bit surprised, but I could see, that's why I asked where.
Yeah, no, just Google Amish and puppy mills and
Yeah.
it'll just make your skin crawl.
Mm.
But you can't put a blanket statement on any group of people.
Mm. Well,
The-
I'm willing to do that in this case.
What's up over there? Ashtabula, Ohio, I think is where I saw that particular situation. I lived in an Amish community, a completely Amish town. I was very, very much the outsider. They called me English. Good morning, English, they would say.
They call themselves Dutch.
No,
Whatever.
no, no.
No.
No, I
Well,
mean,
Matt, what do you think? It's 5 after.
ready to go?
3. Is everybody
Yeah.
here? Except Pete Slavinsky, I think.
Slavinsky's going to join us, but he said he'd be a little late, so.
Okay.
Why don't we
All
get
right.
started?
All right, sure.
We're being
Um,
recorded, so this will be the minutes of the meeting.
Okey dokey. Reason we're calling you together, I think, towards the last of this project, the historic committee had been meeting on how to introduce historical stuff in the park itself. And at that point, things were getting developed as how things were going to be treated on the wall and so forth. And a number of you who were not on that committee probably weren't part of some of those decisions. And I think it's probably good to back up to see how we got where we are. It's been almost 7 years I've been working on this project, or at least 2015, I think was when the final thing happened back with Malone and McBroom. And since then we've been thumbing along, we've gotten funds, and here we are. But there's, I think I will sort of reiterate some stuff, and Matt's gonna fill in the issues on funding and limitations thereof and that sort of thing. One thing I would like to do is to kind of go through all of this verbiage with Matt and myself and hold discussion until towards the end, so we don't get sidetracked on a variety of issues, if that's okay with everybody. But going back to 2015, Malone and McBroom had sort of ended up their report, which was actually, they were just hired to come up with a plan for each building to floodproof their building. And they said, well, how about this? Let's make a flood wall around the parking lot, raise it up a couple feet, you won't see a wall, sounds great. Then Matt, why don't you chime in on how the funds were raised and how we got to where we could begin the project? there's some in between in terms of sea level rise, obviously, too. But, because
So, yeah, I think everyone's familiar with this history. Well, I know you were at one time, but so we decided we didn't have enough money for the flood resiliency, so we had Wright Pierce put together a plan for just the waterfront improvements, basically without the flood wall. And we applied for an EDA loan, and Max, oh, there you are, Max. Okay, you disappeared on my screen. Was instrumental in us being able to land that grant through EDA. And so we met with EDA, and I believe Jan was there for one of the meetings we had. And the fellow from EDA said, why don't you apply for the larger project, including the flood resiliency efforts? And we said, okay. And we originally were going to ask for somewhere around 900,000. That immediately went up to 2.9 million. And then they said, why don't you round it up to 3 million? So that's where we ended up where we are. And now the 3 million isn't enough, but we are able to add that to our $1 million donation from one family, and then another $400,000. Well, yeah, another 400,000 from donations in what the town had set aside. So ended up with a $4.4 million project, including the restroom and the sewer line improvements, which have now already been done. So that's where we are today. And Wright Pierce and SLR, formerly Malone McBroom, have been working on those plans. I've been keeping the EDA informed all along the way, sending in receipts to get reimbursed for their roughly 74% share. Max has been helping us with the financial reports that are required. So we are nearing the point where we've got a 95% design plan, and that Jan's going to talk a little bit about that. It's not quite done yet, but we want to review with you where that is. But I guess my 2 cents was that, and you've heard me, you've seen my emails on this, I believe that what you all did was provide the foundation for where we are today. I mean, we wouldn't be anywhere if that waterfront committee hadn't been formed and started to brainstorm and make some recommendations on what this whole thing's going to look like. So and much of what you recommended is still in the plan, even with the various engineering reviews and the public input and selectmen's input. So I don't know. I think unless you want to discuss anything else, George, I think we move right into John.
Well, yeah, I'll just back up a little bit.
Okay.
Because you've been a little bit easy on yourself. One of the ideas that Matt had with discussions with a lot of the building owners that the flood insurance was getting to be very high, as you know. And how about if we have this flood wall and make it so that we could take the whole south side of the business Main Street buildings out of the flood zone? And that in addition to all of the work that Ponce had done, Pete Slavinsky, everybody on sea level rise, modeling that, it all kind of came together. And, so we got money that we thought was enough to build the wall, do the parking lot improvements, and make it so that the wall will be able to be either raised in the future as sea level rise happens or whatever. So that was all kind of thrown into the mix for the engineers to kind of sort out, study, and so forth. SLR, Mike Darba there, has headed up the team to actually do the modeling that would provide the data as to how high the wall had to be to meet FEMA, because that's the only way that we could get what they call a plumber, which is a kind of, I don't know, whatever it is, that would take the businesses out of the flood zone.
A conditional letter of map revision.
Happen. Okay, record vision. Okay, because there's a Lomar too that for more residential communities. But so that's where we started out, and as you remember, there was a couple of things as a result of the original 2015 report of possibly adding 2 feet of fill to reduce any adverse effects or vision effects of the wall. We thought that, well, the flood level was at 10.0 and the buildings had to be a foot above that. So we figured, okay, we make a 3-foot wall, that'll solve the FEMA problem. And then we could add on to it as necessary for future level rise. Seemed like a great plan. Was Wright Pearson crew got into it, it became apparent that by accounting for surge and freeboard and that sort of thing, in order to get the Clomar, we needed to be up at 5.0. So we spent a lot of time wrestling with, okay, what's this thing going to look like? How, is it going to completely block off our view of the river? All of that sort of thing. And I think everybody here has been kept in the loop mostly. Some people have been there at different times and so forth, but with some of the comments that we've gotten from a few people in the past month, it became obvious that there was some angst, I guess, or trying to figure out, well, how did we get here? So we thought it'd be good to have sort of a wrap-up meeting. There's basically all of the decisions have been made at this point. Back around, got public input, got committee input, engineering input, and so forth. The selectmen they've approved what, the 60%, Matt? Is that what they approved? Yeah. And so we are hoping on the 2nd of February to provide them so that they can approve a 95%. I believe that's what we're hoping. And so let me see, I put together some here. I guess what happened at the very beginning of the job was that the geotechnical borings were taken, and there's below some of the top layer of gravel from the parking lot fill. There's boring clay down to approximately low grade, or it varied. And so it was obvious that if we fill on top of that, it was going to cause some settlement issues. And not only of the soil itself, but the sewer lines that were running underneath that could be adversely affected. So the decision was made not to do that, but to do the wall, use sheet piling to do 2 things: provide the bearing for the wall and keep water from, coming in under the wall into the parking lot, creating future issues. So I think that pretty well sums up the majority of stuff. There were 2 ways to handle the higher wall. Was to either have a 2-foot high transparent wall that went around the whole wall and have a 3-foot solid wall, which was about the same height as the existing fence between the parking lot and the park. Or to have a solid wall that had various patterns in it or whatever, and actually have cutouts. View with the cutouts that you could actually see the river that could be blocked up as needed with what we call stop logs, and as needed at a flood event. And with enough kind of going back and forth, there were some people that kept pushing for transparent wall, some didn't want it at all, and I think some people were frustrated that, wait a minute, we decided not to do that. Where's this coming from? So the decision, for a variety of reasons, maintenance, cost being a big one, definitely more expensive to go with a solid wall with 2 80-foot cutouts in the wall and 30-foot one over on Misery Gulch side, as well as, of course, the launching ramp. So that is pretty much where we are. So we've solved, but with a 5-foot wall as tall as it is, basically makes it so that you really don't have to do anything for sea level rise, because height not only solves FEMA's problem, but it does seem to be in the same ballpark for sea level rise. So from that standpoint, great. The only negative is that we're shy maybe 1.8 million to build it. So the discussions with EDA have resulted in a plan, which they said, okay, get your bids, find the thing to meet EDA's requirements and so forth, and put it out to bid. We suggested having the park and wall as an alternate so that we can actually get a price for the parking lot improvements only. And we'd know what the cost for the flood wall and so forth, because it was in a bid price. And they said, well, okay, assuming you don't have money to build a flood wall now, build what you can, and any monies left over would be turned back to EDA, and then go out and seek further funds for the wall and park. And we said, okay. And I don't know, Matt, if you can add any words of wisdom to that, but I think that's reasonably sums it up. Oh, I think
Well, I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
What EDA said is we can proceed with the first elements, the drainage, the reconstruction of the parking lot, the walkways, and then once those are done and we know what they cost, then we can reapply for additional funds to complete the project. But they're intent on getting the full project done, getting the flood wall. That's a key component here, because that's the source of a good part of the money. The funds that we're using are 2018 EDA funds that are for hazard mitigation. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see, we probably covered most of those things. I guess I could, I know, Jan, you and Mike were going to present some drawings and discuss so everybody, we have a set of like 25 drawings, of which I think Jan has 9 drawings. We sort of extracted that would help to provide everybody with an idea of how this thing is really going to look and be. I'll turn it over to you, Jan.
All right, thank you, George, and thanks, Matt. Let me share my screen. And we can kind of walk through it. I know that Matt had sent out these plans before. Are you seeing my screen now? I assume you are.
Yep.
Okay, and what we've done is we've progressed the overall design through 60%. Now we're at close to 95%. We should wrap up 95% by the end of the month. And I wanted to present to you with some of the highlights of what that what that plan entails. The first plan here is just the existing conditions plan, so you can kind of orient yourself. You've got all the parking stalls along the river, the central core, you got the new restroom, and so forth. The buildings are along Main Street. So that's basically our project area. Our next plan here, I've selected is the grading plan, and the shaded paved area is the area that's under town control of the parking lot. And we can't by the grant, we need to have rights to go beyond that part, that area, if we were to repave anything beyond that. So at this point, we've rather than go out and get rights to, pave up the backs of buildings, we decided to keep the easement rights just and ownership just to the area that we need. So that will all be repaved. In the center of the lot, you see a darker shaded area. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, just to make it easier, hopefully, for people to see what I'm talking about. This center area here is an underground storage area consisting of like honeycombed type boxes, plastic boxes that store stormwater in the event where you've got a tidal situation that doesn't allow the water from the site to drain out. So when the high situation is very high and you've got you're unable to discharge water from the site, any rainwater that falls in the site will get stored in that system underground. And then the outlet pipes from that system, there are 2 outlet pipes from that system, will have backflow prevention valves on the outlets, so that'll prevent high water from the riverside coming into those pipes and flooding the parking lot from the inside. Some of the other improvements are Taco Alley enhanced walkway. We're probably going to do something with stamped pavement through this parking lot, and then and continue. So there's a continuous access way here. Maybe create an aisle through between the parking stalls that are here to be able to gain access to the park from Main Street in a more direct fashion and a safe fashion. We're also planning a sidewalk on the Water Street entrance that'll be against the Savory of Maine property. We're going to slide that existing drive over slightly to create so we have adequate space to do the driveway as well as the sidewalk. We're proposing some drainage improvements up here on Water Street. Currently, there's some issues with the drainage up there, and so that'll clean up that area as well. Then we'll go over the park improvements in a moment. We do show the wall, the high wall, the 13.1 foot tall, the elevation 13.1 will start here, run to the boat launch. There'll be an opening, a 30-foot opening, run around the pump station. There'll be a 10-foot opening here for pedestrian access. Continue over through the central part of the parking lot where there'll be a more enhanced entrance, if you will, to the center of the park, and then continue up until it meets the grade going up the slope. And at that point, that's where the sidewalk will stop, and there'll be an access way into the park if people want to, if pedestrians want to access the park that way, or they can access the parking lot. As George had mentioned, there's 2 what we're calling view panels, which are 2-foot deep openings in the wall that are about 80 feet long on either side of this main entranceway, meant as a way to allow for viewing of the river, view corridor type areas. So you'll be able to see out into the river. These any openings in the wall, these view corridors, the access openings, the boat ramp, will all have a stop log system, which will be an aluminum system that can be it'll be deployed by the emergency management folks in town in the event of a flood or an imminent flooding of that area to keep the water out.
Let me just mention, Pete, we are going to wait till after Jan went through his brief presentation and then take Q&A.
And then through this so with the flood elevation, well, the high elevation being 13.1, and for this particular levee wall, we decided to have a deployable, more of a temporary deployable wall system that can be deployed up to elevation 13.1 near the bridge. So that would complete the outside barrier, flood barrier, if you will, system. So those are the nuts and bolts of the enhancements for the parking lot area. And I'll get into a little bit more of the park living shoreline and wall systems here. I don't know if Mike Zarba, if you want to jump in if I say something wrong or if I'm going off path, please feel free to do so.
Sure thing, Jan.
So what we've got here is we have enhancements to the park area that incorporate living shoreline components, as well as pathway and other seating elements and other elements such as that seat wall here. There's chairs. There's some opportunities for art, sculpture, and then also in the wall itself, we're proposing locations where panels could be put into the wall that could be used for historical information or other cultural type references. With the living shoreline, what we're doing is we're working with the existing toe slope that'll remain as a toe slope where the toe of riprap is now. And we'll be coming in and reconfiguring some of the riprap to create areas where we can introduce some vegetation and so forth into that sloped area, into that intertidal area between the mud flat and the high tide areas. So those will be planted. There'll be some areas that'll be planted and some that will reconfigure some of the stones to create somewhat steeper areas, and then to be able to create those vegetation pockets. We'll have some lighting within the park itself to enhance the aesthetics of the park. Let's see, these are more layout plans showing the rocks. What we have here is just some examples of sections through this wall area and how we are proposing to alter that terrain to create the vegetation opportunities both at the top and at the bottom and the center portions of the wall. This is, we're proposing to work with the stones that we have there and potentially get some more vertical elements in some locations to be able to create flat spots where we can locate vegetation and so forth. And so that's how we're creating what's known as a living shoreline that hopefully will have a better, habitat, if you will, for wildlife and other things in that intertidal zone. And in these particular sections, you can also see, the height of the wall and so forth, what that may look like given the elevations in the park and in the parking lot. We have introduced some elevation change in the parking lot, relatively limited, to be able to get the water to drain from the wall back towards the center of the parking lot versus now currently it drains towards the edges of the parking lot. So we've had to introduce some additional elevation in some parts of the parking lot. These are the structural plans. This here is kind of that Misery Gulch and the boat ramp. It's kind of oriented a little bit differently, but it's just to be able to configure, to show the configuration on the sheets. There'll be the temporary deployable wall system that goes through the active parking lot. Again, we couldn't carry the solid wall up through there because that would cut off access to the parking lot. And just from a frame of reference perspective, the sheet pile will form the foundation of the concrete wall system that you see above grade. All the wall above grade will be a concrete wall. The sheet pile will form the foundation. It'll go just to about grade or so, and then the concrete will start just below grade and continue up. it'll act as both the foundation as well as a cutoff for water that, or groundwater movement through this area here. That was one of the concerns, is if we were to have a high water level situation in the river, and no, obviously no water on the backside of it, there, and not cut off the groundwater movement, we could have some really bad conditions here on the backside of the wall where you could see some failures. So that's basically the wall system. As I did mention, you can see that we'll have these 2-foot deep openings in the wall that'll act as view corridors for if you're in the parking lot looking out. This here is the large entrance at the center of the park, and it's 20 feet wide. What we've tried to do is configure all of our stop logs to be the exact same length, a 10-foot length, so you could take a stop log from here and stick it over here. It's the same stop log throughout the entire project. So we don't have some that are 8'6" for an opening here and some that are 9'10" over here for this opening. They're all 10-foot open. They're all 10-foot stop logs, and they're all the same. So that's what these openings are based on. It makes it simpler from a overall management perspective. And so that's basically the wall system. And here's a section of how that looks. You'll have the sheet pile down below. As you can see, the sheet pile is quite deep. So we'll have a fairly decent width profile. The wall itself is going to be about 2.5 feet wide, the concrete portion. And this particular detail shows a form liner on one side. We're going to propose and change this to have it show a form liner on 2 sides. And the form liner, just to take a brief change or show you what that means. These are different examples. It's not all one form liner. These are different examples. You can have stone, you could have a scale pattern, you can have other geometric patterns. And I know that this pattern over here on the right is another one that was suggested at one time. It's more of a wave pattern. I think that's probably the direction we might be leaning to, although we'll wait to make a final decision until construction probably. And so that, and then the actual stop logs themselves, if they're basically aluminum planks, they're hollow aluminum planks that fit into some channels. Actually, over here might be a good example. Here you've got a center post that'll have this will be a stop log on this side. There'll be a rubber gasket on the non-water side. So as the water pushes against the stop log, it seals it up against the gasket. And then the stop logs themselves will have gaskets in between each stop log. So that's how those end up sealing, and the base will be on a level concrete base. And this is kind of like a configuration. They're all held down with once they're all in place, you have a latch, a lock type mechanism, so they can't float up as the water is coming up. And we are, from a permitting perspective, we've got a FEMA Clomer permit application drafted that we are circulating internally for review. And we hope to get that submitted by the end of January, early first week of February. That should be going into FEMA. And beyond that, we're also preparing our DEP and Army Corps permits for the work we're doing along the shoreline with the living shoreline, understanding that work that we're proposing there will need to be permitted through those 2 agencies. That's pretty much where we are at this point. I'd be happy to discuss things further if you have questions. I can either take them or Mike Zarba could take them.
Pete, why don't you go first? You had your hand up.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Jan. I have two quick questions. Jan, for the first slide, I think you showed, second slide you showed, you talked about the parking lot grade being raised, of course, on the town-owned areas, but not on individual properties. I'm assuming there's a plan at some point to work with the individual property owners to raise them also to meet the new grade. Otherwise, you might have, flow issues unless the lot is graded in a way that it'll always put things back towards the center of the lot. So that was question number one. And then question number two was for the living shoreline sections that you showed, where the riprap is being removed or moved and placed in different locations, is fill going to need to be brought in to bring that bank, whatever slope, up to certain elevations for your plantings?
I'll take the first question first. So since we're on this slide, what we've done is we've designed the parking lot by matching grades along that property line, essentially. So we're not changing the grades beyond the property line, but we're getting the entire parking lot to drain to in some cases, some new locations of catch basins. In some other cases, certainly along the property line towards Main Street, we've kept catch basins primarily in their same locations, and maybe even have added a catch basin here or there to help with the drainage situation along that boundary, if you will.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and so in the future, I think that we are, any improvements the owners wanted to make to their paved areas, they could certainly do that, and I wouldn't preclude that. With regard to the living shoreline pieces here on these sections, we haven't done a total cut fill to figure out where we'll be, but my sense is that it's going to be, if anything, we'll be removing some material because of we're trying to create space, some not, I wouldn't say flat space, but space that can be stabilized and planted versus right now it's all riprap. So we'll need to create some pockets in some locations where we'll be actually removing fill and creating a wall behind it. And it may be a balanced situation. So I really don't have that total number. We're in the process of trying to quantify what our actual impacts are going to be in that area.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to chime in before we get farther. Was it yesterday's rain, Matt, that the parking lot actually had water in it? Or maybe it was it last week during.
It was Monday.
Yeah, it was Mondays. Okay, so
Yep, it was Monday. Yep.
and it was not a high tide. Although I think probably the drains were blocked off with water, but it was strictly runoff from Main Street roofs and that sort of thing. And it's a good example of what that underground storage will help to prevent. Hopefully that will never happen.
Okay, Mike had a question, then Stephen.
Yeah, speaking as Deputy Harbor Master and Chair of the Harbor Committee, I'm concerned about a permanent constraint that puts the width of the opening for the launch ramp at 10 feet. I understand the utility of having a standard width for all of the openings, but to lock this harbor permanently into a 10-foot constraint does not seem wise.
Okay, let me answer that question for you. This opening, this is the boat ramp here. We've got a 30-foot opening that we've got here, and there'll be posts that won't be in place, but they can be set out at the time that you need them. You'll have a concrete grade beam that runs along here at grade. They'll have some caps in two different locations, internal 10 feet, 10 feet that can be popped off, and the posts can be located in those locations when that's called for. So that's how we deal with that particular situation.
fine. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sure.
Is that it, Mike? Okay,
Yeah.
Stephen?
Great, thanks, Matt. Couple thoughts. One is on the cost side, just the question of if you've done the calculations, working with the business owners of how much they're paying a premium in insurance. Is there some way, this is just a brainstorm, but some way to capture a few years of that payment going forward to then use that to finance the completion of the wall? Like a TIF, but basically saying, hey, you're going to be paying this $1,000 each anyway. I don't know how it adds up. So that's just to throw out an idea there. On the design side, what's the filtration that's built into this, in addition to the storage, which is really great to see and a neat solution? Is there filtration of outgoing stormwater? And if not, can we add that later or build it in such a way to add more sophisticated filtration as time goes on, given the cost constraints today?
Steve, that's a really good question. And I know it's one that was raised earlier. I'm going to flip real quickly down to our full set where we have some, a couple of details on what we're going to do in each catch basin within the parking lot. We're going to have a filter system that'll actually have a filter cartridge in it that'll filter pollutants in each catch basin as the water enters the catch basin before it gets into the system and gets either put into the storage tank or gets discharged to the river. So what we're trying to do is remove pollutants right at the source as soon as it enters the storm drain system to keep it out. And that'll, it'll increase the longevity of the underground storage system and the time between when you have to service and remove any built up sediments in that particular system. And it puts the focus on maintaining these filter cartridges and these filter systems here at the catch basins themselves.
Well, that's terrific. Is there hydrocarbon filtration at all in any of the?
The filtration in these particular, the particular system that we're looking at, they offer a variety of different types of filters. You can filter for hydrocarbon, you can filter for phosphates or phosphorus, you can filter for a variety of different pollutant levels. So that's something we haven't yet quantified as to exactly what we wanted to use, what kind of cartridge we want to put in there, but it's certainly something that we will make a recommendation for at the end. Where this is a fairly highly used parking lot, hydrocarbons will be a concern, but we'll also look at other things too that might be common constituents that you might find coming off of high use parking lots, and we'll match the filter appropriately.
Terrific, thank you. That's great. And then in terms of the add later options, George had mentioned earlier the potential to add further to the height down the road. Is that you could drill into the concrete or some just a little bit on that? I wondered about.
Yeah, that's an option for us for this particular wall system. The design, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we can add additional height. I forget exactly how much additional height with this particular foundation system and the wall system itself, but we could add, it doesn't have to be a concrete wall on top. We could do additional stop logs, or we could do some other type of system if we needed to increase height to address future sea level rise.
Super.
I think by analysis, it was up to 1.5 additional feet total. So 14'6" would be the max height that, if it was concrete especially, stop logs, you may be able to get away with a little bit higher wall, although I don't believe there's any indication that flood levels in the future would be higher than, additional 1.5 feet above what this wall height is being constructed to.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate those answers.
Now, you got to remember too that the wall height is based on its wave run-up analysis and the geometry of the wall. As waves hit that wall, they tend to come vertically up the wall, and so that's also part of the consideration. It's not like you'll have a still water elevation of elevation 13 at the front of the wall. At least not for, in this particular design, but.
I think one of the questions that you asked, Stephen, related to paying for the wall from potential flood insurance premiums that the building owners wouldn't have to pay. I don't know, you can address that, Matt, or whether that's maybe outside the aim of things, but could be explored.
Well, we'd always be willing to accept more money for the project, especially when we've got to come up with a local match in all likelihood for the additional EDA grant. Alan has shared with me the cost of flood insurance if the buyer of his property had to get a conventional loan. Unfortunately, they didn't have to. I don't know if you want to share that, Alan, but it's a substantial amount. I just don't believe that the businesses would be willing to contribute that, at least voluntarily.
Right. If August took a conventional bank loan with a 20% deposit and 80% financing, the flood insurance premium would have been around $25,000 a year.
Wow.
And we own the building outright, and we did a private arrangement and without flood insurance. I didn't carry flood insurance for years and years, and August and us are just taking the chance. And because we raised our building 2 feet from where it was, we feel we're not taking a major risk.
So, yeah, I mean, I mean, we can certainly ask for the donations down the road, but I don't know how willing, businesses would be to pony up.
Yeah, my logic was if we couldn't proceed with the flood wall for some time, and in that intervening time, the businesses were continuing to have to pay a set amount, and that does sound, it's very expensive. I didn't know the numbers, but if you could say, okay, you're paying $20,000 a year right now, every year for the next 3 years that we're not building the wall, would you consider paying $50,000 toward the project? We'll have that completed within that a shorter period, and pay for that. You'll actually come out ahead by X amount.
Right. And that is an issue for an increasing number of businesses as we see the turnover in the properties there, and the owners don't, or the businesses don't own the property outright when they have to do the conventional mortgage. We're seeing, that premium hit folks a lot harder, that flood insurance premium. No, I understand your logic.
That premium, if it were applied to rents in the building, would have driven all the tenants away. You've got you couldn't possibly raise the rents by $25,000 a year and expect them to stay.
That's a problem with all the other business owners too.
Yeah, that's kind of the crux to the issue, and one of the reasons why, it was one of the justifications we used with EDA for the flood wall, is the economic impact could be enormous if these businesses had to pay the flood insurance.
Exactly.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've had a question on the
And then
pavement
Dick has
and
one.
the line paving just to the line that the town controls. For instance, it'd be rather impractical in that alley to pave half of it.
And the reason for that is at this point, the town only controls half of that, but it only controls what we show here.
Right.
And in order to demonstrate to EDA that we can move forward with this project, we would have to have some sort of easement or other or some, binding agreement with the owner of your old building to say that we can pave beyond that line. So that's just in part, these plans, we have to make sure that we
Right.
can pass the EDA straight face test with what we're doing.
No, it's changing times. In the past, the town just paved it.
I would imagine that might be the case, yeah.
I
I
tried
think-
to persuade the previous owner to sell it to us, but he didn't want to talk to me about it.
Well, when you own that building, that's an ace in the hole. You lose too much control.
Well, one thing that probably may happen, but it may not happen with all buildings, is that they'll use the opportunity to repave their section and pay for it.
Right.
Remains to be seen whether that's going to happen. It probably will more often than not, but there always will be somebody that will hold out.
But because the traffic uses the private property, there should be some sharing there at least.
Yeah, although they have exclusive rights for parking in back of their building, so.
No, but again, the alley.
Oh, the alley. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a major thoroughfare and it's privately owned.
Yeah, I remember when the opportunity came up many years ago up on the access to Water Street, where the owner of what's now the Oyster Pizza place went all the way over to what was then Christian Science Church, and the town had been using that access in for years, and the offer was made to have the town buy it for $2,000. And the selectman at the time said, "We've been using it for more than 20 years. We're not paying anything. We continue to use it." So
Dick, your turn.
Just an observation for historical sake. And because I did have a citizen ask me this a couple of weeks ago, if you're doing a presentation, George or Matt, that one of the very early decisions that the committee made, if not the first decision really, was around whether to wall off the town as a one whole project versus making some provisions for each individual building.
Mhm.
And relying on the owners there to do their part, to show up and put up the whatever. So, just a recollection, we went through all sorts of looking at what kinds of facilities existed for protecting individual doorways and so on. And what we're doing now was not a random decision. We spent a lot of time talking our way through which of the two routes to go. And in doing this, from the beginning, I persisted with my concern that if we did not do this, that at some point business owners would start to abandon the buildings, and then the owners would abandon the buildings, and we'd be in a terrible condition. So
I think to add into that, Dick, the Malone and McBroom company was hired originally to do that whole study, and they actually came up with each building by building how to do that, how much it.
yeah. We spent some effort there getting the elevation of every window and every door.
Yeah.
This part and in back behind the bank, so that if anybody asks, that was not an easy and snap decision to go and do what we're doing. And again, I raised that just because I had somebody ask me, well, why don't you just, that's a lot of money. Why don't you just have each of the individual buildings go? And I said, no, we worked months to come to this conclusion.
And an important fact in there, important consideration, was that the building by building solution did not or could not be used to justify the Clomer. So we wouldn't be able to take it out of the floodplain. Other questions, comments?
Looks good. I like it.
I've got a
Oh,
comment.
Barnaby, yeah, sorry.
Through all of this, we haven't heard much discussion about large trucks launching boats. Their ingress and egress. This is a big part of the activity that takes place in that parking lot, and I've been thinking about it for years. But we never mention it. It's already a pretty tight situation coming out between Allen's building and Star's Jewelry, so forth. But I don't know if what I'm looking at on this plan is going to change the ease of getting in and out. It's a pretty tight corner, and if the other choice is to go out up on the Water Street, I just think that since it's such an important part of what happens that on the waterfront, that we need to give full consideration to whatever it's going to take to not impede that important activity. It's not just the small boats and the aquaculturists and so forth. It's, all the big boats that are launched and taken out at least twice a year. I'm wondering if anyone else have thoughts or concerns about that.
We haven't done anything with these plans to change how that launching and taking the boats out would work. I guess the improvement that we'll be making here is increasing the thickness of the asphalt. So we're going to reduce the possibility of these trucks and with the large trailers, destroying the parking lot. But Jan, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but
Sure.
I don't see anything that's been done here that makes it more difficult for those contractors to put their boats in.
Sure. Well, Matt, I'm looking at this a little bit right now with an eye towards that. Right now, the existing pavement comes up and I don't know how close they get to the pump station facilities here. I do know that there's some other, some posts here and so forth, but we are restricting that coming up the ramp and turning right or backing in from the right side, backing in here. We're restricting that movement in that corner somewhat. We can look at potentially some way to maybe pull this back down just a little bit so that we can increase that turning movement or what's available there for turning movements. Can certainly do that.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that input because that's, obviously, there's still have the ability to back in this way and pull out this way, but once they get in the parking lot facing this way, there's only one way out, and that could be an issue up above here. But
I think it would be very helpful to have a discussion with one or more of these truckers, because I'm sure they would have opinions. They know what their usual way of doing things is. I've talked to Paul Cunningham about it. He used to launch my boat for me. Most of the people around here know him. And I've asked him if he'd be interested in talking to the committee, and he always said yes. I also know he's headed for retirement pretty soon. So, but I just think a discussion with one or more of these people would be quite helpful.
well, if you could put him in touch with Matt, and Matt can send the contact over to us, so we can at least have a discussion with him and see what his thoughts are.
I'm looking in the phone book here, Barnaby. Isn't it Paul?
Oh, yeah.
Paul Cunningham. Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to call him and
it's
with him. There's 3 Pauls.
Yeah, I was just going to say that before Barnaby spoke up. Certainly no harm in having a conversation with somebody that's got to maneuver a truck in there and just what is it that he sees when he does that.
Yeah, I see one in Aroostook.
I can give you their cell. I can give you 2 phone numbers right now.
Okay.
The cell number is 207-380-7032. And the home phone is 207-529-5825.
Got it. I'll call him.
Yep. Very good.
Thank you.
One solution is to buy part of Star's jewelry and cut that off and make the alley wider. But I have a feeling that's a stupid. Because that's the only way they can really bring those boats in.
That's
Do you want me
how,
to give you Frida's number?
What's that?
Do you want me to give Frida and John's number?
Oh, Frida, yeah. I'll call her up tomorrow. I'm sure she'd be anxious to go ahead and do that.
Go ahead, Barnaby.
I was just going to say, I have talked to the Cunninghams about this before, and he maintains that he can go out the Water Street route, but you know, those are pretty long rigs. It's pretty tight up there. I just know from parking to go into the post office every day. It's a pretty tight spot there to take a rig like that, trying to make those corners. And I just think some consideration needs to be given to this, because there's not much going on this time of year, but a good part of the year, there is quite a lot going. And they have to step masts and sailboats and all that kind of thing as well. Which they do right there at the parking lot.
Yeah, I don't know if they use our police department at all, but that's a possibility if they need to control traffic when they do that.
Yeah, but it's not just once a day. It could be, you know, half a dozen times a day. The police would be going crazy.
Okay.
Excuse me, but is there a time restriction on launching a boat, or is it accessible 24 hours a day to do it?
Well, they don't usually do it at night. I've met them in the dark before when they were on a tight schedule, but
we do not have anything formally posted that does say limited hours of boat launching.
We don't.
Okay.
No.
Just curious. Thank you.
yeah, I don't think that would go over too well.
I imagine some of it's tidal driven too.
That is true.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands. Well, thank you very much. I'll continue to send you all updates as I receive them. Don't hesitate to, give me any feedback along the way. But, again, your contributions to this, every single one of them, your contributions to this whole process are greatly appreciated here. So I think that if that's it, we'll sign off.
Okay,
Very interesting.
Okay.
great.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the update.
Thank you to all. Thank you.
Good stuff.